My name is Margaret Rhymes, and I was 32 years old when my manager told me I was replaceable. Not angry, not yelling, not even directly. Just replaceable, delivered, in that polished corporate tone that makes cruelty sound like strategy. I worked in data center operations for a mid-sized cloud infrastructure company. I'd been there just under 2 years running change control across 4 regions. Not assisting, not supporting, running it alone, every production deployment approval, every emergency exception, every midnight rollback that prevented outages no one ever heard about because I fixed them before they became disasters. If something broke, customers didn't just complain. Contracts triggered penalties. Healthcare systems went dark. Payment processing stalled. Real consequences. The meeting invite arrived with 24 hours notice. Subject role discussion. I knew exactly what that meant. 22 months of work distilled into one conversation that had already been decided without me. I timed it, 11 minutes. My manager, Michelle, didn't even look surprised when I sat down. She had that same composed smile she'd worn every time I asked about growth. Polite, vague, empty, the kind that says, "This is theater." 2 other managers flanked her silent witnesses. Corporate tradition. No one ever wants to assassinate alone. She slid a folded paper across the table without meeting my eyes. "We've decided not to move forward with your promotion request at this time." I scanned the language. Safe. Bloodless. Phrases like, "not the right fit" and "future alignment." 22 months reduced to font size 11. "What's missing?" I asked, voice steady. She finally met my gaze like she was granting a favor. "Strategic vision. You execute well, Margaret, but this role requires executive presence. Someone who represents the department in leadership meetings." Translation was easy. Someone louder, someone shinier, someone who looked better in a blazer and talked confidently about work other people actually did. "I've been doing this role for almost 2 years, I said. Informally, she replied, "but leadership is different." Then she said the line that changed everything. "We'll be offering the position to someone who can make us look better in meetings. You'll stay where you are and continue what you've been doing. Your technical skills are valuable. Valuable, but not worthy. Like a backup generator. Necessary, uncelebrated, replaceable." I noticed the distribution list at the bottom. HR, her boss, directors. This wasn't a discussion, it was a notification. "So this was never up for debate," I said. "This meeting is a courtesy," Michelle replied, cold and smooth. "Now the Atlas cloud migration is 3 weeks behind. I expect you to pull it together like you always do." That was when something inside me went quiet. I stood up slowly. "I'll follow my job description exactly," I said. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll do what I'm paid to do. Nothing more." I walked out before she could respond. Back at my desk, I opened my official job description and started highlighting. Everything I actually did versus what I was hired for. About 70% of my daily work gone. After-hours approvals, weekend emergencies, midnight calls. For 22 months, I'd been the human firewall that never slept. That ended that day. I updated my status available during business hours only. Set my auto-reply after 5 p.m., copied HR on a single clean email clarifying scope. Professional, compliant, documented. By noon, the confusion started. By the end of the day, the system began to wobble, and I went home on time for the first time in almost 2 years. The first thing that surprised me wasn't the chaos. It was how fast it started. By noon the next day, my inbox already looked wrong. Not full confused. Messages stacked without direction. Threads looping back on themselves. People asking questions they'd never had to ask before because for nearly 2 years, I'd quietly answered them before they even formed. I didn't jump in. I answered only what was explicitly addressed to Margaret Rhymes during business hours and within the narrow scope of my actual role. No translations, no context, no anticipatory fixes, just compliance. Around 1 o'clock, a junior infrastructure engineer appeared at my desk, eyes wide laptop clutched to his chest like a shield. "Hey, Margaret, did you see the question about the Phoenix maintenance window?" I didn't look up from my screen. Was it addressed to me? "Well, no, but you usually..." "Then check with your manager." He hesitated, waiting, expecting me to cave. I didn't. He walked away slowly, like he'd just stepped off a curb that wasn't there. At 2:15, Michelle showed up. Not a meeting. Just standing beside my desk, that passive-aggressive managerial hover that's meant to remind you who's in charge without saying it out loud. "We need to talk about priorities," she said. "My priorities are defined in my job description," I replied. "If something's missing, we can discuss adding it formally with compensation." Her jaw tightened. I could almost hear the math running in her head. The Atlas cloud migration is critical, she said. Customers are getting nervous. Yes, I agreed calmly. Which is why it's strange the person with strategic vision hasn't taken point. Her eyes flashed confusion, then realization, then anger. Margaret, she said sharply, you know how this works. I do, I said. That's why I'm doing exactly what you asked. She stared at me for 5 full seconds, waiting for me to blink. I didn't. She walked away. That was the moment. Not when things broke, but when I realized they would. The afternoon unraveled in small, ugly ways. A change approval meeting started late because no one had the risk documents. An engineering team bounced between 6 people trying to find someone who usually handled this. A customer email sat unanswered for hours because nobody knew which calendar to check. Individually, the issues were minor. Together, they revealed something terrifying. There was no system, there was just me. I left at exactly 5. Phones still ringing. Conference rooms full. Michelle pacing on a call, gesturing sharply, face tight with stress. At home, I opened my laptop and saw the folders I'd built over countless late nights. Policies, frameworks, runbooks, all there, all accessible. No secrets, just no ownership. My phone buzzed. Evan, my boyfriend. How did the meeting go? He texted. Evan worked in finance at another company. Smart, ambitious, obsessed with optics and trajectories. He'd been excited about my promotion, about what it would say. Didn't get it, I typed. The typing bubble appeared instantly. What, why not? Not the right fit. That's ridiculous. What are you going to do? I looked at my highlighted job description on the desk. Exactly what they pay me for. There was a long pause. Margaret, you need to be smart about this, he replied. Just play the game. Do what they want for a few more months, then ask again. I've been playing for 22 months. Then play it better. This is how it works. That's how it works for people who let themselves be used. His next message came slower. You're being stubborn. I'm being honest. Honesty doesn't pay our rent, he wrote. Don't do something stupid. You need that job. Not we. You. Like I was a liability he was managing. I didn't respond. I set my alarm for 8. Not 6:30, not 7. 8. The next morning, I arrived at 8:30 exactly. 31 unread messages waited for me. I answered 8, only the ones addressed directly to me. At 9, a calendar reminder popped up. Change advisory board. I'd been running it for 18 months, organizing agendas, mediating conflicts, making final calls. This time I declined. Reason, please confirm meeting owner. My phone rang. You're not coming, someone asked, panicked. You always run this. Check the invite, I said. I'm not the organizer. Silence. So, who runs it? Whoever sent it. They hung up. The meeting ran 50 minutes instead of 30. No decisions. No authority. Just notes and glances toward Michelle like the answers were hidden in her blazer. By mid-morning, a report went out. Raw numbers. No summary. No context. 17 reply-all emails by noon. What am I looking at? Why does this look different? Can someone explain? No one did, because that had always been me. At 11, someone stopped by my desk again. Margaret, the report's usually clearer. The process is documented, I said. Operations folder. Reporting subfolder. But I used to. My phone buzzed again. Evan, are you still being dramatic? Just talk to your boss. I read it 3 times. Still being dramatic. Like boundaries were a tantrum. I called him. We're done, I said when he answered. What, Margaret? You're overreacting. No, I need someone who's on my side, not someone worried about how I look to their spreadsheet. Silence. You're making a mistake. The mistake was thinking you had my back. I hung up. Blocked his number. For 3 hours, I felt lighter. Then at 2 home p.m., Michelle messaged, need to sync on priorities. I replied, calendar shows me booked until 5. Can schedule tomorrow. She sent an invite for 9 a.m. Subject expectation alignment. Corporate for you're in trouble. That afternoon, an emergency change request sat untouched. 5 people copied. No owner, no decision. My phone rang twice after I got home. I didn't answer. After 5, I didn't exist. I made dinner, watched a movie, went to bed at 10:30. And somewhere deep in the infrastructure, I used to hold together the first real crack formed. By Thursday morning, the office felt like a house with the power still on, but the wiring already burning inside the walls. Nothing had collapsed yet. That was the unsettling part. Everything was still technically running, just slower, louder, shakier, like a machine screaming for the person who used to listen to it. I arrived at 8:30 on the dot. People were already there. Too early, too alert. The kind of energy that only comes from things going wrong overnight. A morning stand-up started 10 minutes late because no one had the agenda. People stood in a loose circle glancing at each other, waiting for someone to take control. Eventually, a manager improvised. What used to take 12 minutes stretched into 25. No decisions. Just status updates floating into the air and disappearing. At around 10, Mark from infrastructure stopped by my desk. Short guy. Always wore aggressively cheerful shirts like he was trying to compensate for the stress. "You break up with the company or something?" he asked quietly. "Just doing my job," I replied. He snorted. "Ah, malicious compliance." I didn't correct him. He glanced toward Michelle's office. She was in early. Looks stressed. That word again. Stressed. At 10:30, I got pulled into a vendor call already on fire. Not because I was needed, because someone panicked and added everyone they could think of. The vendor management lead was stammering. The vendor wasn't buying it. "Our maintenance windows were locked for Q1, the vendor director said flatly. "Now you're saying they're flexible. We've already committed resources." Silence. 5 people on the call. No answer. I unmuted. "March amendment," I said calmly. Section 4.1. Links in the shared drive. The vendor management lead exhaled like I'd handed him oxygen. "Can you send that?" "It's already accessible," I said, then muted again. The vendor director paused. "Someone competent needs to call me in 2 hours. Otherwise, this escalates." She disconnected. A message popped up almost immediately. "Can you handle the follow-up?" "Not my role," I replied. It took them 30 minutes to find what I could have located in under a minute. By the time they did, the vendor had already escalated. Leadership was looped in. Damage control mode activated. By lunchtime, the cracks were spreading. A customer ticket simple routine sat untouched. Escalated from normal to high to urgent. Reassigned to 3 times. The fix was obvious. 5 minutes. But no one had access to the right change calendar. I did. They didn't. Perfect structural failure. At 1 o'clock, Michelle appeared at my desk again. This time she wasn't hovering. She was breathing hard like she'd walked fast. Her blazer was wrinkled. The polished armor was slipping. "This is spiraling," she said. I kept typing. Margaret Sharper now. You know what I mean. I turned slowly. "I know how it used to work," I said. That was the problem. Her eyes narrowed. "We need you to step up." "I am," I replied. "I'm doing the job you decided wasn't leadership material." Her face flushed. "This is about the promotion," she snapped. "This is about responsibility," I said evenly. Nothing more, nothing less. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I have 3 executive meetings today. The VP is asking questions. Atlas Cloud is threatening delays. I need you functional." Functional, like a system that needed rebooting. "Then the person you promoted should handle it," I said. Sounds like exactly the kind of challenge that requires strategic vision. Her mouth opened, closed. "You're being unreasonable. I'm being compliant." She stared at me like I'd insulted her in another language, then turned and walked away fast. Not quite running, but close. The afternoon got worse. A change approval presentation went to executives without risk analysis slides, just raw data. Executives sent it back with 20 questions. An emergency approval took 4 hours instead of 30 because no one knew which criteria mattered. Everyone waited for someone else to take the risk. They weren't helpless. They were uninsured. In a company that punished the wrong decision harder than no decision, no one wanted their name attached. I watched, took notes, stayed silent. At 4, I heard someone mutter in the break room. "Why does everything feel broken?" 2 people nodded. I left at 5. My phone buzzed before I reached the parking lot. I ignored it. At home, I cooked dinner, ate slowly, slept deeply. The system was cracking, and I wasn't holding it together anymore. The calm didn't last. It never does not when pressure starts looking for the nearest human fault line. By Friday morning, the tension had shifted. It was no longer just operational, it was personal. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when I passed conference rooms. Not abruptly, nothing obvious enough to call out, but subtly. Voices lowered, laptops angled away, people pretending to read something very important. At 9:30, Michelle called an emergency meeting. Infrastructure leads only. I wasn't invited. 10 minutes and a message popped up from someone inside the meeting. "Can you explain how the emergency change approval workflow works?" I replied with a link. Change Control Runbook V3 2. Section 7. 5 minutes later, Michelle was at my desk. "People are blocked on multiple fronts," she said, clipped. I didn't look up. "Documentation's complete." "Margaret," she said, leaning forward, hands on my desk now. "Aggressive. You know what I mean." "I know what I'm responsible for," I said. "The rest isn't mine. That was your decision." Her jaw flexed. She straightened and walked away without another word. By midday, the customer situation exploded. Atlas Cloud called in furious. Their deployment tracker said Thursday. The engineering calendar said Friday. The change portal said nothing definitive at all. Their infrastructure director's voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. We have critical production deployments depending on your maintenance window, she said, and you don't know when it's scheduled. Silence. We've worked together almost 2 years, she continued. This never happened before. What changed? No one answered. I stayed muted. 20 seconds of silence on a customer call feels like a funeral. Someone finally promised answers by end of day. Her response went cold. You said that yesterday. She escalated within minutes. Leadership. SLA risk. Contract review threatened. Revenue flagged. At 2, infrastructure sent a formal email. Subject urgent. Monthly change metrics overdue. That report was due the first Thursday of every month. I used to do it quietly at 6 a.m. No one did it this time. Then someone made the mistake. They replied all. No current owner for after-hours change approvals. The thread went dead. Discoverable, time-stamped, preserved. At 3, I was pulled into a call with Michelle and 2 directors I'd never met. One of them asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Who owned final approval on Atlas Cloud maintenance windows? Back and forth. Evasion. Then someone turned to me. Margaret, can you explain how this worked before? I let the silence sit. It worked through informal coordination, I said. I filled gaps between documented processes and actual execution. What does that mean? Michelle asked sharply. It means the system functioned because I absorbed structural failures, made decisions that weren't mine, solved problems no one owned, all undocumented, all invisible, all unpaid. No one argued, because it was true. The meeting ended without resolution. I left at 5. That night at 9:12 p.m., my phone stayed face down on the counter. Someone eventually got tired of waiting for an approval that had no owner. They pushed an emergency database change without a rollback plan. At 9:30, the status page flipped to investigating. By 10:05, it was a SEV, payment processing timing out. Healthcare portals throwing errors. Enterprise customers asking about SLA credits. The incident lasted until after 2 in the morning. Rollback failed once. Dependencies undocumented. That used to be my job. Friday morning felt like a pressure cooker. I arrived at 8:30. Michelle walked past my desk without eye contact. She looked wrecked. 89 unread emails waited for me. At 9, a meeting invite appeared. Subject emergency operations review. Attendees included people who only show up when things are on fire. I joined. Camera off. Muted. Someone said we assumed Margaret was handling it. Someone else replied, she's not in that role. Silence. Then HR spoke. Someone contacted leadership with concerns about Margaret's stability. My stomach dropped. At 11:15, my phone lit up. Unknown number. A screenshot. An email. From Lydia Evans' ex-girlfriend. Sent to Michelle. Subject concerned about Margaret. She wrote that I'd been acting unstable since the promotion decision, that I'd talked about letting things fail, that she feared I might sabotage operations. No accusations. Just concern. The kind that poisons quietly. The text beneath the screenshot read, "Thought you should see this." At 11:45, HR called me in. "Standard check-in," the director said evenly. "Are you planning to disrupt operations in any way?" I slid my phone across the table. She read it. Her expression went flat. "Your boyfriend's ex-girlfriend sent this to your manager." "Yes," I said, after I ended things, without telling me. She closed her notebook. "Continue as you've been." 4 minutes. That was it. The paper trail saved me. At lunch, Atlas Cloud escalated again. Deployments paused. At 1:30, I opened my personal email. 3 recruiter messages, director-level roles. I updated my resume. Didn't send it. Just needed to know it existed. At 2, Michelle called me into her office. "This is bigger than I expected," she said. "It always was," I replied. She nodded, tired. "What do you suggest?" "Decide who owns the outcome," I said. "Give them authority. I'll escalate when that's done." I stood up. "Let me know when there's a decision." The chaos continued behind me as I left at 5. Somewhere between my car and my front door, something settled inside me. They couldn't control the narrative anymore. Saturday morning arrived quietly, like it didn't know what had happened overnight. I woke up without an alarm, made coffee, stood by the window and watched the city stretch into the day. No buzzing phone, no emergency pings, no half-formed dread curling in my stomach. For the first time in almost 2 years, nothing was waiting for me. The incident response bridge from Friday night had gone on without me. I learned the details later, piece by piece, like reading an autopsy report after the body's already been buried. Someone panicking had approved a database change that should never have gone live without a rollback plan. They labeled it urgent and pushed it through because urgency in companies like ours had always been code for Margaret will fix it later. Except I wasn't there. At 9:30 p.m., the status page flipped from green to yellow. By 10:05, it was red. CV1, payment processing latency. Healthcare portals timing out. Customer dashboards freezing mid-transaction. The kind of failures that don't just irritate people, they terrify them. The incident channel exploded. 40 people in 5 minutes. Messages stacking so fast no one could keep up. Questions flying without answers. Someone asked who approved the change. We assumed Margaret would review it. Another voice cut in. Margaret's off shift. Silence. Then panic. The rollback failed the first time because no one had documented the dependency chain correctly. That documentation lived in my head and in files I'd written at 2 in the morning over the course of 22 months. The incident dragged on until after 2 a.m. By then, 3 enterprise customers had mentioned SLA credits. One had mentioned contract review. I slept through all of it, not because I didn't care, because I wasn't on call, because it wasn't my job. Monday came fast. The office felt different, heavy, compressed, like the air before a storm finally breaks. People moved quickly, but achieved very little. Panic without direction has a particular look. I recognized it instantly. I arrived at 8:30. Michelle didn't look at me. 89 unread emails waited in my inbox. I opened the ones addressed directly to me, ignored the rest. At 9, another meeting invite landed. Subject Emergency Operations Review. This one mattered. I joined at 9:30. Camera off. Muted. The room was full of voices I rarely heard. VPs, senior directors, people whose job titles only surfaced when something had gone spectacularly wrong. Questions flew. Why are approvals bottlenecked? Who authorized the process change? What happened Friday night? Why are customers threatening penalties? Then someone said it. We assumed Margaret was handling it. Someone else replied, quieter now, she's not in that role. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revealing. A senior VP spoke up. Margaret, what's your assessment? I unmuted. Structural failure, I said calmly. Responsibility without authority doesn't work. No one interrupted. You can't assign someone outcomes while blocking decision-making power. I continued. The system functioned because I absorbed the gaps. Once I stopped, the gaps became visible. The call ended with no resolution. 10 minutes later, my desk phone rang. Internal extension, Margaret Michelle said. Her voice was different, smaller. Can you come to conference room C, just for a minute? I checked my calendar, nothing scheduled. For what? Please. I walked over. The door was closed, blinds drawn. She stood alone in the room, no laptop, no notebook, just her. Close the door, she said. I stayed in the doorway. She stepped closer, voice low. I need your help. With what? Everything she admitted. Atlas Cloud, Data Core, the metrics. Leadership's watching me. Customers are threatening to leave. I waited. I know I made a mistake with the promotion, she said quickly. I see that now. I just need you to handle things the way you used to, just for a few weeks, until this calms down. Until what calms down, I asked. The structural failure, the unpaid labor, the fact that you built a system that only worked because someone volunteered to be exploited. Her jaw tightened. You're being vindictive. I'm being clear, I said. You promoted someone else to handle this. Let them. This is my career, she snapped. You should have thought about that 22 months ago. I walked out. At 11:15, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text with a screenshot. It was Lydia's email to Michelle, forwarded by someone inside leadership. Reputation warfare. When she couldn't control the breakup, she'd tried to control the narrative. Make me unstable, dangerous, a risk. At 11:45, HR pulled me into a room. Are you planning to disrupt operations, the director asked. No, I said, I'm doing my job as defined. She nodded, then continue. By lunch, Atlas Cloud had paused all deployments. By mid-afternoon, I updated my resume. Didn't send it, just needed to know I had options. When I left at 5, the building was still buzzing. Conference rooms packed. People hunched over laptops, eyes red, fingers shaking. I walked past all of it. The system hadn't burned because I sabotaged it. It burned because it was built on silence, assumption, and free labor. And I'd finally stepped away from the fire. The email came Saturday night. Subject Monday leadership meeting. 9:00 a.m. Required. Attendees: Margaret Rhymes, Michelle Carter, VP Infrastructure, VP Operations, HR Director, Infrastructure Director. I replied with a single word, confirmed. Then I closed my laptop and took the rest of the weekend back. I went for a run Sunday morning. Meal prepped like a normal person. Watched a movie without checking my phone every 10 minutes. Slept. Really slept. Whatever was waiting on Monday could wait until Monday. By the time I walked into the conference room at 8:55, everyone else already looked like they'd lost a fight. Michelle's posture was stiff shoulders pulled tight like armor that didn't quite fit anymore. The VPs had the flat expressions of people who'd spent a weekend reading escalation emails instead of seeing their families. HR sat with a legal pad already half full. The senior VP didn't waste time. Let's be direct, he said. We have operational instability, customer risk, and clear single points of failure. We need a path forward. Now. He turned to me. Margaret, what would it take to stabilize this? I leaned back in my chair. Let the question breathe. Let them feel the weight of asking it this late. Formal authority over change control operations, I said. Direct reporting line. No informal expectations. Compensation aligned with responsibility. Title change to Director of Change Control Operations. All documented. The room went quiet. Not shocked, calculating. They were doing the math. Cost of yes versus cost of no. Lost customers. Contract penalties. Reputation damage. The infrastructure director spoke first. Timeline to stabilization. Immediate, I said. Once authority is clear. Michelle cleared her throat. What about broader department structure? That depends, I said calmly. If you're asking whether I'll continue absorbing work that isn't mine, no. If you're asking whether I'll execute within a clearly defined scope, yes. The VP nodded slowly. Fair. HR jumped in. Title and compensation adjustments usually take time. We could start with an acting designation, great development opportunity. I met her eyes. Then nothing changes until it's done. She blinked. That's not standard. That's exactly how it's worked for 22 months, I replied. Responsibility without authority. I'm not repeating it. Michelle tried again. We need movement before that. Customers are watching. The customer needs confidence, I interrupted, voice steady. Confidence comes from structure. Rushing recreates the same problem. The VP raised a hand. She's right. We do this correctly. Legal asked quietly. Any exposure here? Wage classification issues. No one answered. They spent the next 20 minutes drafting language. Interim authority, effective immediately. Formal title and compensation within 30 days. When they read it back, I nodded. That works. One addition. They waited. This gets communicated clearly. No ambiguity. No assumptions about informal responsibility. Done, the VP said. Meeting adjourned at 10:15. As people stood, Michelle lingered. This could have been handled differently, she said, still unable to admit where it started. Yes, I replied, 22 months ago. I stood to leave. She stopped me. No, she said suddenly, voice rising. This is unacceptable. The room hadn't fully cleared yet. People could hear. You sabotage customer relationships, she continued. You let critical processes fail. You made me look incompetent. I stayed seated, calm. I did my job, I said. The one you said I wasn't qualified to be promoted for. Don't give me that, she snapped. You don't get to just stop. I decide what your job is. Behind her, I saw movement in the doorway. The VP had returned. Michelle didn't notice. You're replaceable, she said louder now. So don't get cocky. The VP's voice cut through the room. Quiet. Cold. Michelle. She turned, went pale. Please escort Michelle to HR, he said to the director behind him. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Wait, she started. Now. The room froze as HR stepped forward. Michelle walked out without another word. The VP turned to me. Stay. 20 minutes later, he returned. Who owned after-hours approvals the last 22 months? I did. Informally. And who was supposed to? Nobody. It wasn't documented. He nodded. Structural failure. He stood. Your role starts now. Report directly to me. We'll formalize everything by end of week. An email went out before lunch. Michelle on leave. Interim reporting structure announced. My new role effective immediately. By afternoon, another email followed. Michelle's employment terminated. At will works both ways when executives feel personally embarrassed. By 4 decisions that had stalled for days were resolved in minutes. The system wasn't magically fixed. It was finally real. And for the first time since I'd started, it didn't depend on silence. The building exhaled after Michelle was escorted out. Not relief exactly. More like disbelief. The kind that settles in when people realize something they'd quietly normalized had finally crossed a line in front of the wrong audience. I stayed at my desk the rest of that morning doing nothing dramatic, answering messages addressed to me, reviewing requests that now finally came with clear authority attached. It was subtle, but the tone had shifted. People weren't guessing anymore. They weren't asking who usually handles this. They were asking, what's the decision? Around noon, Mark from infrastructure stopped by again. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking. Did Michelle really just get walked out? Yes, I said. He let out a low whistle. Whole floor heard her yelling. Didn't realize it was that bad. It always is, I replied. You just don't hear it until the mask slips. By early afternoon, the system started correcting itself, not because I was working harder, but because ownership finally existed. Approvals moved. Meetings ended with decisions. Escalations stopped ricocheting between inboxes. At 3:30, the VP called me into his office. No theatrics. Door open. No blinds drawn. We reviewed your documentation, he said. It's thorough. I nodded. I like paper trails. Good, he replied. You're going to need them. He paused, then added, for what it's worth, Michelle's outburst wasn't a surprise to everyone. It was just the first time she did it where she couldn't rewrite the story afterward. That landed heavier than I expected. By 4, the official announcement went out. Michelle's departure. Interim leadership structure. My role clearly defined, reporting directly to the VP. No fluff, no spin. Just facts. My phone buzzed once an unknown number. I didn't answer. I already knew who it was. At 5, I shut down my computer and walked out with the rest of the floor. No glances, no whispers, just a quiet recalibration of gravity. That night, I cooked dinner and ate it standing at the counter, too wired to sit. I thought about the past week, the chaos, the accusations, the way being calm had been treated like defiance. Michelle hadn't been undone by my boundaries. She'd been undone by her entitlement being witnessed. The system hadn't failed because I stepped back. It failed because it was built to survive only if one person stayed silent. And silence was the one thing I'd finally stopped offering. The first thing that changed was the noise, not volume direction. Monday morning, the office felt almost unfamiliar. People moved with purpose instead of panic. Meetings started on time. Emails landed with clear asks instead of vague desperation. The constant background hum of someone else will fix this was gone. Because now someone actually owned it. I arrived at 8:30, same as always. No fanfare, no sudden respect parade, just a quiet understanding that when a decision landed on my desk, it was meant to land there. By 10, a change request that had been stalled for 3 days was approved in 12 minutes. By noon, Atlas Cloud confirmed deployments were back on schedule. By 2, vendor escalations stopped. Not because I was working harder, because the system finally matched reality. 6 months later, an email from HR landed in my inbox. Subject compensation review. Retroactive adjustment. I opened it slowly. Back pay. Not full director salary for the entire period, but a documented adjustment for the work I'd performed outside my role under prior management. The explanation was precise, almost clinical. Based on scope analysis and documentation review, compensation misalignment was identified during your tenure. This adjustment reflects responsibilities performed beyond assigned role. I accepted without comment. The paper trail I'd kept, the timestamps, the emails, the runbooks made it impossible to argue with math. That evening I left at 5:30, not out of defiance, not to prove a point, just because I could. Walking to my car, my phone buzzed. A new number. I didn't read the message. I blocked it. Whoever it was, Evan Lydia, some ghost from a version of my life that revolved around explaining myself, it didn't matter anymore. At home, I made dinner, sat on my couch, let the quiet settle. The job itself hadn't been the hard part. The lie had been, I didn't break their system. I stopped being it. And when a system collapses without one unpaid person holding it together, that's not sabotage. That's exposure.